But first, Republican Congressman Cory Mills of Florida. Cory, thanks so much for joining me. I want to talk to you a little bit about what this all is. Is it like look over here and kind of don't pay attention to what's going on with Epstein when we talk about Tulsi Gabbard joining the briefing room today and bringing back up Russia and 2016 and calling this a hoax to look into and even using the words treason?
Well, no. I mean, look, Republicans can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can actually go ahead and chase leads on the Russian collusion hoax, which has now been declassified, that Tulsi Gabbard has found that actually does show that President Obama, his administration, but also Joe Biden, has been culprits in trying to weaponize our government in an effort to not only influence operations to interfere in elections, but also to go ahead and wrongly accuse people with false intelligent leaks. And so I think that that's something that's very important when we talked about the weaponization. In the 118th Congress, we actually had to vote and create a special subcommittee for the weaponization of federal government that Jim Jordan, the chairman of Judiciary, led, so that we can continue to look into these things. Now, when it comes to the Epstein file, I think it's very clear. I signed on to a bill that is actually a discharge petition by Thomas Massie that would allow for it to be completely exposed and transparent to the American people, but not injuring or hurting those or doxing those who are actually victims of this sexual predatory manner of Epstein Island, or actually help those to continue their investigations to move forward. But I find it odd that the Wall Street Journal, of all people, is trying to claim that they have word that President Trump is on one of these lists. Meanwhile, if these are classified documents that Congress hasn't even seen, I find it very highly improbable that the Wall Street Journal, who is part of the fake media propaganda that's been utilized since, I don't know, the modernization 2012 Smith-Mundt Act, somehow has this classified information that not even members of Congress or the Senate has.
So, Representative Mills, I want to pull up a poll. I'm looking at how Republicans are viewing Trump's handling of the Epstein files. 40% approve, 36% disapprove, and 24% are unsure. This is an issue that many say the deep MAGA movement is anti or against the way it's being handled. So what is your response to say that there's a large faction of the party that's uncomfortable with how it's being handled across the board from leadership?
Well, while it's great that I see your poll, it's also important to note that this is a bipartisan issue where no one wants to see women and children being sexually exploited, trafficked, or in some way having this predatory manner. And so I think that it's a universal thing that we want those who have actually committed these types of crimes to be held accountable. I think the issue that we find here is that if we were to utilize someone like Ghislaine Maxwell as an example, who's currently incarcerated, who holds the actual jurisdiction for further investigation? Is it the FBI? Is it the Department of Justice as a whole? Is it one of the actual committees or subcommittees like Judiciary, like Oversight? So I think there's a problem, one, with finding out who actually holds the jurisdiction of this, but also just bear in mind that there was a lot of things that had been destroyed. And if President Trump was actually on these lists, as the Wall Street Journal claims, you don't think that the Obama administration in their 4 years in office would have utilized that in the campaign? Of course they would have. So that just follows further credence to the fact that it's a lot of fake media and a lot of wrongful reporting. But yes, I am one of those members of 20 plus that signed on with Thomas Massie's bill to go ahead and be transparent to the American people, provide what is out there, but making sure we protect the victims.
And quickly, because we're running out of time, what do you think this meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell was all about? What was the end goal there with the DOJ?
Well, I think that it's continuing to get further information to make sure the president's properly briefed. I mean, this isn't something that's abnormal. This actually happens with all cabinet members on a morning and daily basis, whether it's the Secretary of State talking about geopolitical or bilateral, trilateral issues, looking at different conflicts like the India-Pakistan conflict or the Iran-Israel conflict or the current situation in Syria, whether it's the Department of Defense to talk about weapon upgrades, modifications, the Golden Dome, troop movement, or recruitment. I mean, this is not something that's abnormal for a Department of Justice or an AG or ODNI or John Ratcliffe as a CIA director to brief the president every single morning on what's going on and what's continuing to be leaked.
Congressman Cory Mills, thank you.